So today I'm in Dublin with Aisling Fitzgibbon, the girl against fluoride. I was up at, 5:30 this morning, Ash? What time are you up at?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Long journey from Kerry and Mayo to Dublin. And we're in Kilmainham
Royal Hospital.
And why?
Well, there's a Food Safety Association meeting on food safety and allergies and contaminants. So we're here to highlight the issue of the fluoride in the water and how this is a major issue for food safety in Ireland and how this is not being addressed at the moment. So we're wanting to find out why.
So we're just going to ask them one or two awkward questions and see what they have to say, basically.
That's it.
Cool.
Yeah.
labelling issues resulting in allergen recall involving a large number of products. So we're not talking even about a specific form of contamination, we're talking about labelling.
I'll go to the floor now. Does anybody have a question?
Stephen Kerr. Lads, thanks for the presentation, it's very informative. Obviously, in relation to food production, do I need this? Can everyone hear me? In relation to food production, water is obviously very important. So I just want to mention something about that. I have a very short paragraph and just a quick question. The Journal of Dental Medicine and the Journal of Community Dentistry and Oral Epidemiology have both documented from human studies that a percentage of the population are intolerant to low levels of fluoride, which is present in fluoridated water. Both journals recorded that the exposure to fluoride resulted in increased incidence of medical ailments, including dermatological disorders such as eczema and hives, as well as other conditions like abdominal pain and nausea, vomiting, headache and depression. So given that Ireland is the only country in Europe with a mandatory policy of water fluoridation and the aforementioned peer-reviewed published studies, can the panel advise, and I'm specifically I'm interested in what James has to say on this, if they're aware of any medical studies which have been undertaken in Ireland to examine the likely impact of fluoridation and its contribution to medical ailments such as skin disorders?
Thank you for the question. I think in terms of food regulation food legislation is peculiar insofar as that when the water comes into a factory, it's the responsibility of the local council and it's an environmental issue until it hits the factory wall. And then once it gets through that, if it's used in the production of food, then it's suddenly a food issue. So the fluoridation is done at source, it's by a council, so it's actually covered under environmental legislation. In terms of and I'm not familiar with the specific studies that you quoted there, but one thing I will say is that I think you have to be careful when you look at scientific studies. You must always go by the edge that one swallow doesn't make a summer. There are studies coming out every day, on a whole plethora of food-related topics. One study will tell you a glass of wine a day is good for you. The other study will tell you it'll kill you by the time you're 36. And these are all peer-reviewed studies that are coming through. I don't know if you remember there a few years ago, there was a study done by the Ramsey Institute in Italy, whereby they looked at the additive aspartame, and they found that it caused cancer in rats at doses that you would normally be exposed to in foods. Especially dietary, it's an artificial sweetener, so it would be used, for instance, a lot by diabetics who want to control their sugar level, and by people who maybe are on diets and want to avoid or want to lower their sugar intake. And that caused quite a stir. But when the European Food Safety Authority actually looked at the data, I mean, it was left like a Swiss cheese by the time they were finished with it. It goes to show that it's very dangerous to actually go on the basis of single or even a small number of studies. In terms of fluoride, there's no question that fluoridation of water is a contentious issue. and it's a contentious issue in Ireland. I don't know if we're still the only country who actually fluoride. Maybe hands up. I just don't know. But the more reliable sources, for instance, would be things like if there was a Cochrane report who actually do meta-analysis of all the data that's there, or even the EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority themselves. Now, I don't know if they'll do that, again, because it comes under a different heading, you see. I think it's an environmental issue. So, legislatively, they would be constrained. I haven't looked at the website, maybe they have done something on it, but it would have to do with its inclusion as a food. But certainly, if an August body like the European Food Safety Authority were to come down that yes, there is a risk from fluoride, then the authorities would have to take that.
Yeah, and just as a very quick follow-up, James, thanks for that. You mentioned as well legal implications, I think, during your presentation at some point. Just to, I mean, you're questioning these peer-reviewed studies, but the fact is also that Ireland is in breach of 33 EU directives by adding this fluoride to the water. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but just to let everyone know that we're actually in breach of 33 EU directives.
Well, I can't comment on that because I'm just not involved in that area, and specifically with regard to legislation, that's the FSPA is responsible for that. But what's happening to the Irish authorities, because they've been fined. I mean, if you breach an EU directive, then I think you're hauled before the EU, and you're fined accordingly, isn't it?
Yeah, that should be happening. Yeah.
Is that happening?
No, it's not. Yeah. So, Ashley, what's your response to the answer given by James McIntosh?
Well, James didn't answer the question that was asked of him, but he did raise some interesting points. He said that water is the responsibility of the local councils, as it's an environmental issue. But this isn't the case, as legislation was changed in 2007, taking the power away from the local councils and giving it to the government. And then he said after that once it enters the factory wall, that it then becomes the responsibility of the food production industry. And this is another group who are failing to do their job. And when it was highlighted that Ireland is in breach of 33 EU directives over the policy of water fluoridation, James mentioned that if this was the case, that we should be hauled, before the EU, but this isn't happening. So the EU are also failing to do their job. This is another group that are failing in their duty of care. But James did mention that he was aware that fluoride is a contentious issue in Ireland. So by virtue of that fact, James has knowledge that fluoride is questionable in our water. So what we are going to do is follow up on that and find out more.